Welcome everyone to AURI Connects Fields of Innovation, part of AURI Connects monthly online series featuring updates on the work that AURI is doing to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products and processes. I'm Dan Scogan, the AURI Director of Industry and Government Relations, and your host for Fields of Innovation. The AURI Connects program is hosted by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. Fields of Innovation is focused on bringing together Minnesota's regional ag and food value chains to build capacity and successfully commercialize new and emerging crops. Events will focus on highlighting new crops, examining marketing opportunities for emerging crops, and highlighting new technologies in existing crops. Remember that this event is being recorded and archived and can be found at auri.org. Today, we will be exploring farmer-centric ag technologies with Dr. William Anderholt, and he is the director of the Program Management Office at Grand Farms, and Andrew Jason, Special Projects Coordinator for Grand Farms in the Red River Valley. With that, Dr. Anderholt and Andrew, welcome to Fields of Innovation.
Thanks for having us, Dan. We're really excited to be here. Again, my name is Andrew Jason with the Grand Farm team. I am not here to give you a geography lesson, but really excited to talk about what Grand Farm is doing to advance agriculture in our region, and specifically how we're focusing on the growers to solve that. So we are a Fargo-based organization, but I live in Moorhead, so I'm a proud Minnesota resident, so excited to be here.
And as Dan said, my name is William Adderholt. I am the Grand Farm program manager. And in that role, what brought me to this really was the connection to the grower and the connection to the rural communities. We'll talk about what the Grand Farm is throughout the presentation. But in terms of my background, I've been working with rural communities for about 10 years and thinking about how technology and the byproducts of that technology can positively impact those communities. And with us, I think the Grand Farm really helps achieve those goals as well. So as we look at the Grand Farm, the purpose of the Grand Farm as it was developed was to help develop or help accelerate agriculture technology to achieve successful outcomes of many of the challenges that the world faces on a global scale. We do that through collaboration of stakeholders across higher education, across research organizations, governments, and industry, including small and large businesses. For us, the Grand Farm is about the future of agriculture technology, and we believe that the Red River Valley can help affect change across the world through technologies that are established with a farmer-centric mindset. And we'll talk about what farmer-centric means to us and where we get these ideas from. But as we move forward, we're looking for engagement. We're looking for people to be involved. And so as we present, I'd love you to think about how you'd like to be involved in the Grand Farm going forward. So where this began, Barry Batchelor, a well-known entrepreneur of the Red River Valley, who started Phoenix International, helped put the first computer in the Steiger tractor, and also currently helps run Appario, stood up on stage at 1 Million Cups. And 1 Million Cups Fargo, he asked the question, what is our major? What is our ability in the Red River Valley and North Dakota to really impact the world? When we look at global challenges, what are those that we can actually help solve because we have strengths in those areas? That led to a conversation throughout the community with stakeholders across all those industries, higher education I mentioned, to think about that, what is that major? And agriculture technology became the front and center recipient of that. Looking at our strengths in agriculture, the history of agriculture, and research universities that are unparalleled, it really became clear that we could help drive forward those outcomes to solve global challenges. In 2018, in July, Brad Smith, president of Microsoft, and Barry Batchelor stood up on stage, and they actually were able to talk about key concepts around ag tech. Brad Smith talked about the rural digital divide and how opportunities in the world exist really based on how much connectivity you have within your community and how rural communities are currently lacking in those opportunities due to the connectivity. Barry Batchelor stood up and talked about the Robo-Ascension Valley. the idea that the Red River Valley could become the leader in agriculture technology throughout the world. In April 2019, the Grand Farm was finally launched. Following a discussion with many stakeholders throughout the community, we were able to bring U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue to the Grand Farm, along with Senators Hoeven and Kramer and Governor Burgum, to help break ground on the first of the Grand Farm site. In October 2019, Microsoft pledged $1.5 million in seed capital to help drive forward the Grand Farm initiative. And that continued forward with March and April 2020, when we began to achieve many of our strategic objectives that we'll talk about. The Grand Farm is continuing to build momentum, and we'll talk about many of the programs and services that we've been able to implement and what that future looks like and how growers are getting involved every day. So Grand Farm is about solving the world's problems. It's about looking at global challenges and identifying how we can affect that change immediately. The first problem that Grand Farm was established around was feeding a global population. The world is expected to reach 10 billion people in the next 30 years. That gives us 30 years to solve a challenge of hitting an increase in 30% of the world population, and an additional challenge of how we do that sustainably. This doesn't just affect the farms, but it also affects our supply chains and our ability to get food into people's hands without waste and without disease catching hold within the supply chain. There's an agriculture labor shortage that's existed for 50, 60 years at the very least. And it continues to grow and become a problem each growing season. We recognize that autonomous technology and advanced agriculture technology can help ease the burden on farmers so they can continue their work within agriculture. It could also drive new people into growing who might not have thought about that as a profession because of their new interest in the technology that exists. Lack of venture capital. The Midwestern United States is well known for a lack of venture capital and the ability for entrepreneurs to really succeed in achieving their dreams. There's a workforce skills gap. Microsoft just published a report during COVID-19 that stated 250 million open software development jobs will exist in the next 5 years, and those jobs will go unfilled. So when we think about agriculture technology and the future of solving these challenges, ag tech includes the technologists who are involved in this. And so for us, it's important to help move towards a solution that can help bring technologists into the field of agriculture technology. And finally, workforce safety. Agriculture work is one of the most dangerous jobs throughout the United States and continues to be the most dangerous job in many countries throughout the world. Many of us who are connected to agriculture know people personally who have been injured or killed in the work that they're doing. That is very important work to feed the growing population of the world, but also something that hopefully we can make safer in the future. So let's talk about the Grand Farm strategy quickly and the 5 pillars that we set out to achieve. The first is to establish a global ecosystem to help solve these challenges. The Red River Valley is the centerpiece of this work. North Dakota, where Fargo is located, becomes a piece of that as well, in Minnesota. But we're really looking globally. How can we begin to connect the ecosystem around ag tech around these concepts and ideas to help drive change throughout the ecosystem and address these challenges? An innovation platform was the second strategic objective. How do we bring venture capital and the ability for people to accelerate the ideas into reality faster? The Grand Farm test site, an innovation space where people can come together, test out and demonstrate their technologies and capabilities, show them off to the world, educate the masses, and be able to really explain what agriculture technology can look like in the next 15, 20 years. Emerging Digital Academy was the 4th objective. When we looked at the workforce skills gap, we recognized that there was an opportunity for a technology academy to exist in this area that could help drive recruitment into technology businesses, especially those in ag tech that would be connected to the Grand Farm. And finally, public policy, bringing thought leaders and experts to the challenges that lawmakers face and identifying what are the barriers that exist for ag tech to exist, and how can we remove those barriers before they become a reality that holds our industries back. This set across 3 key milestones that the Grand Farm saw and became objectives for us. The first was around row crop technology. How do we get to that next generation of agriculture technology and row crops, which are really prevalent in the northern Midwest? Then, with an adaptation of those technologies, we see phase two being adapting to technologies for a global setting. How do we look at other geographies, other traditions and cultures, and help to also adapt the technologies to help them change in a successful way towards being able to feed that growing population we described? And then finally, in phase three, looking at the future in state of ag, space ag, being able to look at what is it like to grow crops on Mars, on the moon, and in transit to those places as well. So to talk a little bit about the objectives, the strategic objectives and the areas that we were able to achieve this year. The first was the Grand Farm test site. The Grand Farm test site had 5 projects planned for 2020. And through the help of partners and people being involved, 41 projects were held on the Grand Farm test site. We also had 3 partners planned for 2020 and ended with 9, and 5 events planned for 2020 and ended with 22. COVID-19 was a reality that hit everyone. I remember going to our partners early on and saying, is this something that you want to continue doing? I recognize COVID-19 is really about making changes today and how to really protect ourselves. And it really became about the future. The partners said, no, we don't want to stop. We want to move forward and think about the future, because this is what the Grand Farm's all about. Help us dream and create a reality we want to see. That led to those 22 events and 750 people coming to the Grand Farm to participate in the programs that we held. Andrew's going to explain some of those programs.
Yeah, well, thanks, William. So, as we talk about Grand Farm, there's really 3 areas that we focus on providing value. So the first is the connection. That's through this global ecosystem by bringing people together. The second is facilitation, which is bringing these partners around specific pain points and projects that occur out at Grand Farm. And William will talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then third is amplification. That's just taking what's happening in the industry and amplifying it through events, programs, just bringing people together. So as William said, last year, we were able to slap together a variety of events safely, which was very fun. And this year, we're really excited to double down. We're optimistic about COVID being in a relatively safe spot this summer as we start looking at our programming. And we also have our test site is 40 acres, so there will be adequate social distancing, COVID safe, all the CDC guidelines are going to be followed. But we're really looking at Thursdays as being our day of programming out there. And we're looking at a variety of events. So the first one, and possibly the most important, is our grower roundtables. So what these grower roundtables are meant to do is they're meant to bring growers and industry together to talk about pain points around specific topics. So for instance, we're going to be talking about crop and soil management, farm of the future design, sustainable practices. So the idea is we want to just create a space where growers can talk about the pain points that they're facing, and we can use those pain points to kind of help steer the Grand Farm and the projects that we're working on. The second is field day. That's really meant to just celebrate our partners and the work that's happening in innovation in agriculture. So we want this to be a very public facing event where the public comes. There will be a variety of food trucks and hay rides and whatever. Let's just bring the public out there, expose them to what's happening in agriculture and how innovation is occurring in agriculture isn't what 90% of the global population think it is. So there's a lot of exciting work being done. The third is innovation days, which is really simple. It's about celebrating the innovators in our industry. So again, there'll be a variety of themes ranging from rural connectivity to information flows, how data is passed in the ag tech space. But we're going to bring the innovators from the entrepreneurs, the kind of leaders of corporate organizations together to talk about what they're doing to drive the industry forward. And then finally, we believe that there just needs to be more connections made in the ag space, and that through connections, innovation will happen on its own. So we're just going to provide a happy hour. So every Thursday at 4, we're going to do a happy hour with really light programming where we'll celebrate and highlight 1 or 2 people. But it's really meant as a networking opportunity where growers, industry, academia, policymakers can all come together to celebrate and connect and bond over agriculture and possibly a delicious bush light. So, and then we're also focusing on 3 conferences this year. So when I say conferences, obviously there's going to be a bit of an asterisk on what COVID allows. But the first, and which I think maybe is the most exciting, is the space agriculture. As William said, one of our milestones is low and zero gravity farming. We thought this was going to be a 10-year path, and then we'd start thinking about that. But we started to connect with the industry, and specifically NASA, and realize that there's a lot of exciting work being done, and we can drive change quicker by facilitating the connections and bringing all these people together specifically. So we're actively engaging with NASA, SpaceX, Senator Kramer's office here in North Dakota around this space agriculture conference, which will be sometime this summer. We're still figuring out a little of the scheduling things, but we're excited for that. The second is our Cultivate conference, which is all about celebrating innovation. And so in 2019, when we hosted this, it was 600 people, roughly 300 growers, 300 industry people, where it was all day programming with a variety of speakers ranging from an angry farmer panel where we just got 3 growers who were very opinionated, which is most of the growers I know, which I love, to talk about what is industry doing that's driving them crazy, to leaders of major organizations like Bobcat, CHS, to talk about what's happening. And then finally, the third is Autonomous Nation, which is focused on connecting the autonomous industry with the policymakers and how can we create this innovation infrastructure and public-private kind of partnership to drive policy forward when it comes to autonomous systems in the region. William, if you want to go to the next slide. So I'll take a moment to really kind of talk about our grower engagement strategy. So we recognize that if we're going to solve these global problems that agriculture is facing, we have to make sure that we're focusing on the growers and that these practices and new innovation is going to be actually implemented by the growers. So we want to put the growers at the heart of everything we're doing and connect them with the policymakers, university, ag, industry, kind of our partners and our ecosystem. So we're doing that through 3 kind of key pillars. The first is identification. So sourcing those pain points that those growers are facing, for instance, through the grower roundtables that we're hosting this summer, and really highlighting what they're focusing on and what industry needs to be highlighting. The second is input. We want to connect our partners and the industry with growers specifically. When we hosted these grower roundtables last year, the #1 feedback that we heard was that growers just don't feel like that they're being listened to. Industry is putting out things that just doesn't make sense. This bolt isn't connecting with a bolt somewhere else that they need. So we just want growers to be able to connect with industry to discuss kind of the future of the industry. And the third is appreciation. Going back to the workforce shortage that is in agriculture, we recognize that being a farmer is a tough job and most people don't understand it. So we want to celebrate the work that our growers are currently doing, support them, but we also want to drive the future of the industry by doing educational sessions. William showcased kind of a slide that was a potential rendering of what the Grand Farm campus can be. We kind of jokingly say that we imagine every 3rd grader in North Dakota and Minnesota is going to come to Grand Farm for hands-on experiences to get the to get real-life applications about what farming is really like. And we've also created some good relationships in the industry. So William, if I go on the next slide. One of those is through a publication called Future Farmer Magazine. If there's any growers on this call, there's a good chance you receive this in the mail. It's mailed out to you 16,000 growers, about 5,000 industry professional. My background is actually media. I helped launch this, was the last thing I did before I came over to Grand Farm. So very good relationship with them. But we recognize that if we're going to be doing these grower roundtables, we need to tell the story about these problems that the growers are facing. So we are taking those pain points, we're putting them in a report, and we're sharing it with industry in a very public way. So this was in the October issue of Future Farmer, where we highlighted 24 pain points that growers are facing and how that we can start thinking about addressing those. So it's the idea of how can we bring the public attention, but also the industry innovation around these pain points. Back to you, William.
Thanks, Andrew. I do want to highlight that for us, the grower-focused engagement through that pain point report is extremely pivotal to the work we do on the Grand Farm projects. When one of the major things that was discussed when we were starting Grand Farm was the need for grower participation in the innovation. And so when we talked to industry professionals, they said they felt disconnected to the grower and what the growers actually needed. The other thing they felt disconnected to was how the different growers interacted throughout the world. When we talked to growers, they said they felt that technologists were missing the mark in terms of the technology that was being produced, and that things that they were producing weren't meeting the needs that they had today. And so now that pain point report is shared out with our project participants to help them understand what are growers facing, what are they looking for that can help change the way that they interact today and do their work today, and what can drive the most value. So when we think about these projects and what I'm about to explain with our project framework, please understand that the grower has been a part of this from the very beginning and how these projects are formed. The Grand Farm projects exist in 3 different kind of tiers. The first is small scale. And when we think about small scale projects, that's a demonstration of technology and future thinking ideas on the Grand Farm that might engage one partner. And so an example of that might be someone coming out and doing mapping with the UAV on the Grand Farm and sharing their thermal sensors and how they worked. Second, the kind of second tier or second largest mid-tier project is one or two or more partners coming together around a concept to innovate and bring together new technology and demonstrations. An example of that might be a farm management company working with that UAV provider and identifying how those thermal images can provide insights to growers right away, and then demonstrating that out to the public. And then finally is our large scale projects. These often include 10 or more stakeholders in large scale problem sets that exist in the agriculture industry. This year, we're expecting to have 100 or more projects on the Grand Farm. I know that we already have about 80 queued up for the project, and we're open to anybody who wants to come out and actually participate in that. Please feel free to reach out to us about that. We have over 40 organizations who want to be a part of this as well and who are participating in those projects. But I did want to spend some time on these large scale projects a little bit. The first is Project X. That's actually going live in February. And this is going to help create a traceability backbone, the ability to follow information from the input provider, the people providing the seed and the fertilizers, all the way through the value chain, through the grower, through the elevator, through the processor, all the way to the end consumer, and helping to understand how that data flows and who is able to see that information and make their decisions based on it. Another one that's very fun is Project Acres, being able to take autonomous trucking and apply it to the agriculture industry to help with some of those labor issues we talked about. This is one that we were able to bring a demonstration onto the Grand Farm in October and show off what an autonomous truck could do on interstates and on highways today. A pilot should go live middle to late of next year, or this year, actually 21, that will help solve some of the issues that we're seeing with harvest. And we're really excited that it's happening so fast. So as we look at these projects, like I said, we want people to be engaged and involved. We'll begin to put out project reports regularly. And if there's anything you're interested in doing, please let us know. I do want to shore up some of the biggest questions in that is, does Grand Farm get to keep intellectual property, be a part of the intellectual property? We're a 501c3 nonprofit. Our goal is to facilitate. Our goal is to amplify, like Andrew said. And so we want to bring people together around these ideas and provide the capabilities and resources necessary for these to become a reality. We're here to really allow for that space to occur and those innovations to occur, not to take any of those. And so we're really excited to work with people on these pain points that we were described and driving those innovations forward today. Here's some of the partners of the Grand Farm that have already came on as official partners in the for 21. And then another thing is, as we became a nonprofit, we brought on a board of directors. And so I want to highlight those individuals. The first is Mike Durheim, co-founder of Prime Digital Academy, which helped us with our workforce development activities through Emerging Digital Academy. Cindy Schreiber-Beck, who is a North Dakota representative, who has done some amazing work in the agriculture industry for North Dakota. Jay Schuler, who has been a part of, who is a regional entrepreneur in agriculture and has done amazing things as well in the industry. Taya Spellhog, who's really been a core member of our team, I'd say, from the very beginning. Someone who's really helped drive opportunities to the Grand Farm and helped to tell our story well. And finally, Mark Wadney, who is a part of the North Dakota Farmers Union as a board member or as a president and as one of our board members. The other people I'd like to highlight are members of the team, outside of Andrew and myself, which you've heard enough of at this point. But Brian Carroll, who is our director of operations for the Grand Farm, Lee Schwartz, who's our director of marketing and communications, Ruchi Bardwaj, who's one of our project coordinators, and Miranda Tassa, who's our business operations manager. And with that, I know we're going to have a lively discussion after this. We're really excited to participate with you all in that engaging conversation.
Well, thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Andrew, for that presentation. Remember now, as you're watching Fields of Innovation today, if you want to ask a question, you can put it in the Q&A portal, and we will pass those on to our presenters today. So I'll just throw the questions out there, and whoever feels comfortable going after them can pick them up. I'm going to start with what pain points. I know Andrew talked about pain points quite a bit during his presentation. What pain point do you think is the most critical for industry to address right now?
So I'll throw out two. The first one I'll throw out is what we call the integration of systems. So, as we look at growers and their operations, the work that's being done there is very complex, and a lot of the systems just aren't working together. They have to have one piece of software to manage their labor there. They have to have one to manage their finances. They have to have one to work on the soil, and none of them are talking together. So I believe that there's a big focus that could be placed on this integration of systems and kind of that communication that flows from one. One of the programs that I'm really excited about is this information flows about how that data is passed. That ties in directly with Project X and the traceability piece of it. And the other one is that I'll throw out there that, this doesn't take a grower roundtables and talking to hundreds of growers to figure out, is just the affordability of new products and the profitability of growers. Now, this is a complex system. I think we all know how everything is impacted from trade to weather, and the range, but as we start looking at what a grower has to have on their farm, it's a multi-million-dollar operation, and a lot of these growers are going to be bigger than Grand Farm will ever be based on their P&L sheet. So I think the affordability of new pieces in their operations is a big thing. William, do you have any other thing to add?
No, I think you covered it really well. Thank you, Andrew.
There was a question about selecting projects, and they were wondering what that process looks like and whether or not growers are involved in deciding which projects come to Grand Farm.
Yeah, I'd love to hit on that. So I handle a lot of our land asset management, and obviously there are some technologies that require very specific amounts of land. to actually test them out and demonstrate them. An example is things like biologics, where we're specifically putting, bacteria or enzymes into the soil to help drive changes in crop yields. Um, I can't put that next to someone using an innovative fertilizer because it's not really going to show, what the fertilizer does or what the enzymes do. So I have to separate those out. Those type of projects are the things that I have to kind of limit. I only have 45 acres to work, or I only had 45 acres in 2020 to work with. And so I had to be a little bit more selective in terms of how those might work and how we could bring those onto the Grand Farm. Most of our projects are with people who are doing technology innovations, people who are working on drone sensors, and people who are working on autonomous tractors and autonomous vehicles, ground drones and sensors and computer vision and things that exist outside of the farm, like data processing, cloud, and connectivity. All of those things affect agriculture. And for us, because it's not tied to a specific resource like land, I can have as many of those as we can possibly want, where we can bring those in and we can show off the demonstration and bring those together. It also allows us to exist outside of the geographies. One of the best projects we had last year, or one of the widest reaching projects, was a project with 9 different organizations, which took an augmented reality system out of Australia and combined a lot of the inputs that we were collecting. Now, in terms of how growers are involved in this, it goes right back to that pain point report. When I'm deciding how to, with limited resources, how to allocate land to these partners, I need to think about those pain points as kind of a foundational piece of this. How is the technology, if we have to limit it, going to actually achieve some of the successful outcomes that we're looking for through the pain points? And from there, we're able to work with our industry partners who want to do those, or our research partners who want to do those things, and make sure it makes sense for them as well.
Think about the next 20 years. Which technologies do you think have the most potential to change how farmers do their job over the next 2 decades?
That's a really fun question, and I wish that we had a whole presentation just on that, because I could spend the next, over the entire weekend, speaking to you all about kind of the thoughts around that. Right off the top of my head, the farm management tools that we're starting to see, the computer applications, are going to continue to evolve and be pivotal to the future of the success of farming. One of the pain points we ran into that we have documented was growers felt like there was too much information coming their way. All of these technologies are collecting information and sharing them, and often in a very raw format. And what that means is they might have 50 million data points in front of them, and they have to figure out what to do with those 50 million data points. Farm management software is allowing them to have insights at their fingertip, and that will continue to evolve. One of the things that the pain point report talked about was multiple growers said, I would love to have the top 5 or 10 things that I should do on my farm to help me increase my success year to year. Not the 50 million things. I just want to know the 5 to 10 things. And that's what we're starting to see through this technology. The other thing, just to give you a second one, is autonomous technologies. I foresee a future where the combines, tractors, we remove the operator from those. And what that allows people to do as growers is allows them to move into an operations role. They're not spending all their time in their equipment, but instead helping to drive the orchestra that is everything that's going on their farm, from the drones to the tractors, as well as the business operations that go on. And by providing parameters to those technologies, they're able to really save a lot more of their time, especially in crunch areas like harvest, and times like harvest, where they're already under a lot of stress. And so this could help shore up a lot of the problems we're seeing in terms of farm labor that we discussed earlier.
Can I
Andrew,
add
your face kind of lit up when we asked that question. So you must be thinking about the next 20 years as well.
Sure. Yeah, I got a couple. I'll just add to there. So on the autonomous systems, I agree with that. And it's crazy what is already here when it comes to autonomous systems. I think is the first thing that a lot of laymen don't know about. But the other thing I think that's really exciting about autonomous systems is, historically what the heavy equipment on farms has been is, it's just over the years, it's progressively gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and more expensive in accordance with that. However, I think as we look at the autonomy fully getting implemented, we're going to be seeing a shift going backwards as the equipment gets smaller, more affordable. Two of the companies that we work with and are engaging one is EarthSense. They create it's a tiny ground drone that drives in between row crops and identifies using AI different parts of the plant and can help track everything through this farm management thing. And then another one is a small robot company, which I don't have to explain what they do, but the idea is how can, rather than one $500,000 combine, how can we have 10 $50,000 smaller drones do the equivalent amount of work through swarm technology, things like that. The other piece, I think, kind of going back to the farm management, that's really exciting, is blockchain. We're really excited to see how that gets implemented into agriculture. So that is going to be a heavy piece of Project X. And actually, we're excited. We haven't gone public with this, so I'm breaking my own rule here. But on February 26th, we are going to be hosting a blockchain in agriculture webinar. That's going to be getting some of the leaders that are currently doing work in blockchain in agriculture to talk about what they're doing. We're going to have some different pitch sessions, so some of the other companies that people might not know about can kind of get involved too. So again, we'll go public with that next week. So if you want to participate in that, that will be on Grand Farm's social media channels and website. And then, the last one, and I see somebody ask a question about profitability. The other thing I'm really curious about, and this isn't a technology, but it's just the carbon market. As we start thinking about carbon sequestration and all these major corporations like Microsoft going to carbon neutral, I do believe that the next kind of gold rush in the ag space is going to be in the carbon market space. And I know a lot of companies are just starting to think through how can we track that and monetize it.
Well, that was going to be my next question. We've talked the 20-year view. Now, how about the 12-month view? We have a question here that what's the number one thing being done to enhance farm income this year?
Web applications. That's the easiest thing. I mean, I would say the last 5 years have been around sensors and getting sensors out on the farms. I know, I think I read a report, year over year, we're seeing cumulative gains of 20% more sensors on farms every year. So year over year. And the amount of data they're collecting is it's tons. And you can't do anything with that data without these farm management applications that can take that information, provide some level of insight to you. We're starting to see a lot of companies develop their own application for how, when you collect the data, you can understand what to do with it, and it can provide you with real-time information. An example might be something that tells you when you're expecting rainfall and how much water is currently already in the ground, so that you might be able to monitor your drainage systems. If you're able to get that taken care of ahead of the rainfall, then you might be able to save some of your yields in case the ground floods. And so we're seeing a rapid production of web applications. Almost every partner I talk to has some level of application like that. And I think that is the biggest thing this year that will continue to be developed. I think we're still 5-10 years out from mass-produced autonomous vehicles and things like that on the farms, but really being able to utilize that data in a positive way is what we're seeing today.
I know you briefly mentioned row crop focuses. Can the technologies that you're testing at Grand Farm help farmers diversify their production of specialty or non-traditional crops?
They can. So what we're starting to see is the ability, especially with autonomous vehicles and autonomous technologies like in your planter and seeder, being able to actually do different patterns, different techniques within the ag, within your land. So if you want to plant 2 crops at once in the same area, you can do that. And that's been a technique for a while now. However, what we're starting to see is it making it easier and less time intensive to do so. In terms of specialty crops and non-traditional crops, I would say that majority of these technologies, there is some level of adaptation to a specialty crop. So we can take these sensor technologies and apply it to strawberry fields or to someone growing hemp. it's very easy for these models, these algorithms that these companies are producing, like Andrew mentioned, EarthSense, to be able to adapt their technology using, their computer vision, using the sensors and cameras to tell you insights on what's going on, to specific specialty crops. And I think that that's just going to take time. When we talk about specialty crops, yes, there's more money in it for the growers, but a lot of these companies are thinking about how to scale fast. And so they're really focused in on the largest number of acres, which is often the row crop.
Andrew, did you want to add anything there, or should we?
I guess the only thing I'll maybe add to that is, so, what Grand Farm is really about is bringing people to the table to talk about what is happening when it comes to innovation in agriculture. So I think of somebody like Martha Montoya, who is a entrepreneur out of Southern California. She has a company called Ag Tools, which is basically kind of a real-time, it's a web application that shows real-time markets in the specialty crop field. So, but basically the idea in the case study that she used was that people can use her technology and technology like this to identify, I have a little bit of land here that, I don't know what to do with it, that they can see what the market is for strawberries, for instance. So she, used the example of how, I think it was a grower somewhere in North Carolina who had a little extra land and was looking to diversify their income and kind of their revenue. And they recognized that strawberries were a big potential. So I see kind of these applications that are going to be showcasing what the market's like, which will give a lot of, let growers explore new opportunities without having to be like, ooh, what's going to happen this year if I invest, $80,000 in trying out this new crop.
I have a question about vitality of your investor pipeline. Do you see too much money in the pipeline with nowhere to go, or not enough money to get some of these technologies successfully launched?
So we currently aren't directly connected into the investment side of this. We are connected in terms of being able to facilitate the conversations between venture funds and the industry. I would say my feeling is that there is not enough money in ag tech right now for the startups. I think there's a lot of money in terms of larger businesses, but in terms of startups, there are many organizations doing amazing things that will change the world. And they're having trouble in terms of how to find opportunities. And so I'm happy that we've been able to work with groups like, Plug and Play. We've been able to work with Microsoft's TechSpark to think about, how to drive in a innovation platform to help these startups achieve success. And so the Grand Farm has been evaluating other avenues that we could get more directly involved in that piece. But for us, it is a need, and it is a reason why it became one of the central challenges that Grand Farm was actually looking to accomplish.
I know you have a desire to be global. How global is your reach right now?
Very. I would say about half the companies I work with and speak to, and Andrew speaks to right now, are outside the United States. I would say if you look at the ones that are within the United States that we speak to, only probably 20 or 30% are in our Red River Valley. That's not how this project started. This project really started with us talking to a lot of the local organizations and people wanting to be involved. Now we're on calls with Australia, Denmark, Singapore, Germany, the UK regularly, and talking about how we can get involved with these projects and concepts now. One of the two companies that Andrew mentioned today, or one that he did, a small robot company, exists outside the United States, and they're very involved in the Grand Farm. Canada is a major player in row crop technology and innovation. So is South Australia. And then finally, another company that we're very involved with has been Agronomy, which is a small company out of Australia that does augmented reality mapping of farm technology or of farms. And so it's global. I think that part of, one of the byproducts, and we're always looking for the silver lining on things, of having to go virtual during COVID, was the ability to really connect with a global ecosystem faster than we thought we would. We were thinking global reach by 5 years, and it's been very surprising to see our outreach to date being global today.
What kind of technologies are being looked at to help farmers adopt more environmentally sustainable practices?
So we're actually looking at a large-scale project on the Grand Farm this upcoming growing season called Project Compact, which looks at, I see regenerative ag in here too. It looks at sustainability and regenerative ag practices and how these future state technologies, these ag tech technologies, actually impact sustainability in a positive way. Sustainability is a very broad and undefined concept often, but when we look at things like Andrew mentioned in terms of carbon sequestration or water runoff, or the ability for us to take a look at the compaction of our soil and the microbiome that exists in the soil, we can start doing that today. And so we've been able to bring together partners around this project that can help identify the byproducts that are positive on sustainability from advanced agriculture technology. I do want to mention a project as well that happened last year, and a facilitation that Grand Farm was able to connect. Ellingson Companies is a tile drainage system company out of this region, Red River Valley, very well known. They were working on how their tile drainage system can continue to advance and be involved, and we were able to connect them with Cheney Middle School. Cheney was working on a science fair project around the filtration of tile drainage systems, and how we were able to potentially remove some of the fertilizer compounds that often get into our waterways by attaching this filtration system to the drainage systems. That middle school was able to go all the way to nationals with their science fair project, eventually visiting the White House through that connection and the ability for them to work with Ellingson Companies.
A couple of things you add to that, Dan, if that's okay.
Sure.
Well, first I shared the grower pain point report in the chat, so if anybody wants to check out what I'm talking about here, they can see it there. But one of the things that we heard as we were talking with growers is, what is sustainable practices? A lot of them are saying, well, I use the fertilizer that has the stamp of approval from the USDA that says it's safe, but what the USDA says versus what the consumer says versus what Europe says is they're all different. So I think that's one thing that we all need to industry needs to define, is what does sustainable practices look like? The other thing that I think is really interesting, going back to this autonomous piece, is as we look at the ability for equipment to be running 24/7, for there to be swarm technology and having a variety of machines running at one time, I think it'll be interesting what can be done from a mechanical standpoint versus a chemical standpoint. So, I think that will be less input that needs to go into the ground. So I think that's going to be really exciting. And if you don't mind, I would just love to briefly go back to the capital piece of it too, kind of addressing the grower pain points too. I think the very first one in that pain point report is that growers are sick of seeing all the investments coming out of Silicon Valley. I've talked to some investors that are on the coast, and a lot of them don't know what a grain elevator is. And when you start talking about an elevator, they think of an elevator in a building. And so I think that goes back to the point of this lack of venture capital in the Midwest, and we need to invest in our own. So that's something that we're actively pursuing and encouraging there to be more access from VC funds in the Midwest. And we envision a path where Grand Farm will probably get into that avenue in the future.
But Dr. Anderholt, just to wrap up the next question in our Q&A portal, there is, if I heard you right, there is work being done in regenerative ag. Is that right?
There is, and there will continue to be. We are working with task forces involved in a Grand Farm to help advise us on how we can continue to do that work. Andrew and I, neither of us have professional backgrounds in farming. But we're able to work with the growers. We're able to work with the researchers from NDSU to help us define those things out and continue to develop out a framework for agriculture technology that makes sense. I do want to highlight really quickly in terms of regenerative ag. When we think about the ability for us to save time through smaller equipment, like Andrew mentioned, or swarm technologies with multiple machines running in simultaneous orchestra, we're able to then also think about how do we navigate our own land to potentially rebuild some of the wetlands, have our shelter belts that make sense to help allow wildlife to exist in our areas. We're able to think about minimizing the use of chemicals. We're starting to see that with fertilization techniques year to year. All of those things will exist, and we're starting to see them continue to drive forward with these changes, and we're really excited about that. What we need is the ability to understand that technology and simultaneously understand what it's going to be doing as well, and that's where that Project Compact project really took off, and why it became a big target for us for 2021.
Very good. Well, the livestock producers don't want to be left out. What's Grand Farm doing in the world of livestock production? Are you seeing any work being done there?
Oh, yes, tons. Feed systems, tracking, the ability to see, what is the fat composition of your cows and their nutritional intake just from scanning them from the outside. There are amazing technologies happening in livestock production right now. We're working with the USDA on thinking through some of those problem sets in terms of the mapping, and being able to track your livestock. We're looking at different ways that technologies can be utilized to keep them safe, and maintain a healthy environment for them. The on the Grand Farm, I want to highlight Kevin and Stacy Biffert, the landowners of where the Grand Farm currently sits. They donated us the land, but Kevin has recently, because of his exciting conversations in this space since the Grand Farm started, has begun a livestock tracking company. And so we will have cows on the Grand Farm, is my understanding, next year with the tracking system. And we are looking at the potential of having a Grand Farm site on the western part of North Dakota potentially, which would have livestock as well, to be able to help provide a space for these opportunities. That's still way out. That's still just a concept, but it is something we're very cognizant of, and we believe is very important to our producers.
And I'll just add that Kevin Bifford, who's very involved and has an active voice in our ears, his motto for Grand Farm is "Don't forget the cows." So that always goes through our head.
Yep.
Very good. And typically on Fields of Innovation, we get this question: how can people get involved with what you're doing at Grand Farm? Is there room for more?
There's always room for more. Andrew highlighted many of the programs we're going to have. Even if it's just sending us an email with your insights and your questions, it helps us think about these things. If it's sending us an email saying, this is the problems I'm seeing today, that helps us. If you want to come to the programs and participate, we want you to be there. It's open to the public. We're putting this stuff out on our website. I think the website was shared in chat. Please take a look there. There's a contact us page on our website, as well as emails in the links or in the chat box here as well. Go there, send us an email. I try and get back to those emails within a day, and often asking for a meeting. Even if you came with a simple question, these questions aren't always so simple, and I'm looking for ways for people to be involved, and so is Andrew. And we'll meet with you. We'll want to hear about what you're doing and what your thoughts are. One of the questions I've been getting a lot of is, how do I contribute to the Grand Farm? Our team's growing. We're still trying to figure out what that looks like, as we continue to grow our partnership program, which was talked about, as well as for people who are looking at actually demonstrating their technology on the Grand Farm. Like I said, just send us an email. We'll get a meeting set up, and I'll find a way to put you out on the Grand Farm if I have the resources available.
And Dan, I just want to say you can find us every Thursday at 4 at the Grand Farm happy hour. So that's an open invite to anybody that wants to come. You can find kind of our location on the website, but would love to see you there and safely bump elbows with you.
Perfect. And I just wanted to ask real quickly on that step beyond the grower or the livestock producer. Are you working with processors or the entrepreneurs who are trying to add value to the ag commodities?
We are. So, local company Bushel, that's an example. CHS through the processing plant. Even some of the grocery stores you can think of. We're in contact with them. We're looking at this as a value chain project and initiative. When we think of while the Grand Farm is centered around the grower and the work that's happening, we also recognize that for the grower to get these increased yields and for there continue to be excitement in the ag tech industry, this needs to be a value chain. This needs to extend across the entire value chain. So we're looking at the elevators, the processing plants, the people who run those, having conversations with organizations like American Crystal Sugar on how they can continue to innovate and drive forward across some of their pain points. This is a huge undertaking, and it's only possible with everyone's involvement and engagement to date. Our team can't do it alone, and I can't say enough about the local university systems, the local policymakers, the local organizations who have become partners and continue to engage with us, because that's what's allowed us to do this work.
Final thoughts for you today. Based on everything you've shared with us and everything you're looking at Grand Farm, what makes you most excited about the future in agriculture?
Maybe I'll tackle that one first, William, if that's okay. I think there's two things. So I did not grow up on a farm, but my cousins grew up farming my grandma's land. I think the energy and hopefully the attention that's going to be brought to agriculture is going to be big. I want people to recognize what farming is now and what problems that they're solving. So I'm really excited about just creating this innovation hub and kind of a center of excellence around agriculture to drive forward innovation in there. And then the second one that I'm personally super excited about, just because I'm a big kind of space geek, is this space agriculture. Again, we thought this would be a 2035 thing that we would start maybe thinking about a little bit, but like I said, we're actively engaging with NASA. There's been talks about, can we put a Mars test plot out there to showcase work that how agriculture is going to be done on Mars. I just think that's really cool. As a little sci-fi geek inside of me is going crazy about that.
Doctor?
Yeah, for me, this started with the rural communities, and that's how it's got to end. The agriculture industry is very prevalent in the success of our rural communities. It's what helped them get established and build out in these really remote areas. I believe that the agriculture industry is the financial driver for investments into different technologies that can really help affect change. We've heard a lot about things like human migration and migration out of rural communities. I believe that these connectivity solutions we're continuing to hear about, whether it's Starlink from SpaceX or Microsoft's TV white space, or a lot of the connectivity providers now putting broadband out in those communities, that's going to help drive people to be able to continue existing in these communities from now until the end of time. For me, I believe that's possible by the agriculture technology industry and agriculture industry flourishing. When we think about what that also does, it helps improve the education systems and healthcare systems of those communities. And that is so important, especially when we're thinking about things like COVID. So for me, agriculture technology is not just about agriculture, but the people that live and breathe it every day, and how they can have amazing families and amazing communities that they can live in.
It's the Grand Farm. Andrew Jason, Dr. William Anderholt, thank you very much for your time today. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes AURI Connects Fields of Innovation for today, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. AURI's mission is to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products and processes. Join AURI Connects Fields of Innovation next month to discuss market opportunities for promising new winter annual crops being developed by Minnesota farmers. We'll be joined by university and industry experts that are working to develop and commercialize winter camelina and pennycress to talk about their potential uses and to learn more about how winter oilseeds can provide producers with economically and ecologically sustainable options to diversify their crop rotation. And you can always learn more at auri.org. And we always welcome your feedback on our programs, so please respond when we send you an evaluation. Thank you for participating today, and remember to join and like Fields of Innovation Facebook page. For more information on Fields of Innovation or any of the work at AURI, go to auri.org.